groups here, about 15% of the heads of these investing and trading clubs are women, which is actually pretty similar to the percentage you see in leadership roles in finance and business. And typically need about 30% for somebody coming in a group to feel like they're welcome, like they belong. So basically what you're seeing is the significant underrepresentation that's systematic in these groups at the undergraduate level. These groups allow these core members to build up experience and expertise, which puts them years ahead of peers who don't have the same background. And in short, what you end up with is a gender gap that's a skill gap that comes up from an undergraduate experience. To put it differently, in terms of the underrepresentation of women in finance, I think How to Women in Hedge Funds, which Suzanne is very involved in, definitely say hi to her if you can, has been trying to work with the industry to promote the development of women and the improvement in the representation of women in the industry. But really, it's up to you to change these things. In terms of really bringing about lasting change, to be frank, I've been saying this year after year in these leader summits, and it's very, very hard to figure out how to bring about meaningful, lasting change. But let's just try again this time. And maybe, Elaine, can you comment on HVAC's own work, getting more women to be involved internally, and also maybe comment on how your involvement in the women's group on campus sort of factored into HVAC and how the relationship there works?
Sure. So HVAC is doing a very conscious thought process when they interview people. They really, even before the interview, when we have sections or lectures, we reach out to the women in our group and we're saying, hey, we really think you have potential. Don't be scared to ask questions. Let's get lunch, let's get dinner. This is definitely a role that you can do. And when I came in, I was really intimidated, but the president of the club actually reached out to me and he's like, hey, I see you haven't been speaking up, what's up with that? And I was like, well, you're kind of scary. And, and he's like, no. And so we grabbed a meal and he's totally nice. So I think just breaking the ice in that sense, is really helpful. And I've tried to do that for the people who I teach in my section as well. And I think we've seen a lot of that translate into better women representation on board. So last year we probably had around a quarter, now we have about a third, next year we're aiming for half, but it's not affirmative action, we need a half. It's more let's just get more women involved and see if they're comfortable with this role.
That's brilliant. And in terms of the interaction with the women's groups on campus, you have SWS as well as Women in Business. Yeah. How does it work? What is the interaction like?
So it's very different. I chose HVAC because it was co-ed. I was in WIB. It's all, it's women in business, only women can join. It's very different from interacting with guys, I think, and I think it's a valuable experience to have that kind of work setting, and because that's what's real life is. I'm interning at Citi right now. Most of the people there are guys. I'm on a sales and trading floor for this rotation. 95% of people are guys. So I feel that's a really important experience to have at the undergraduate level. So I do like WIB, SUBS, FWS, all great organizations. Highly recommend you join. If you have friends who are going, just recommend them to do that. But for me personally, I think I really wanted a co-ed setting.
Brilliant. I guess part of the reason why I kind of kept pushing that point is I think right now a lot of the investing groups here are really struggling to come up with ways to involve more women. And when you're starting from very close to zero, it's very, very hard to reach initial critical mass. So I think having groups like Women in Business and Smart Women Securities on campus is actually a very easy way for these groups to essentially cheat, to basically use their resources to develop a broader, more diverse group of core members. Do you think that that's a good way to try and build a diversity, or is there a bit of a reluctance on the part of women's groups, from what you've seen, to do those kinds of collaborations?
So we've tried really hard to do collaborations. In general, it comes down to just co-sponsoring events, so that doesn't really get to the goal of having more women involved. So I think we're all still trying to figure out how we can get more women involved. Some people, some women, a lot of my friends are I just don't want to do finance, that's just me. And I think that's a lot of the underlying issue as well. So just getting more women thinking that business is an attractive career for them and exploring that option is really important.
Gentlemen, in terms of women in your groups?
So, Elaine mentioned, that they don't really pursue affirmative action as a strategy to, succeed on this front. Well, last year under me, we did, in that, we really do believe that having women in your group significantly improves the culture of that group, which therefore makes it much more easy to retain members, make more effective education, and you can just list the positive impacts down the line. So when we have 100 applications and 10 of them are women, and usually we would take 1 or 0, then you don't have enough women to build enough critical mass, as Alexi was talking about, to make it a legitimate cultural function. When you only have a few women amongst dozens and dozens of men, that's really not a good balance. So what we really look for is, if you can check the boxes of can you fit in, can you do the work, do you have the passion to become future leaders in our organization, then you also have an added skill set that just allows you to make our culture better and make our organization better. So we took a lot more women, and frankly, that drastically improved the culture. And while I'm not going to make any endorsements, my bet is that the president of our organization next year is going to be a woman. And to me, that significantly enhances the value add that we can provide now and that we can provide in the future.
And I think to take it on the goals level, right? Like on the goals level, you want to be able to allow a very broad range of future members. And if you want a wide community of future members to basically find that top talent, that top intellect, you're not going to get there by barring off 50% of the population, right? And that if you don't have the existing women in the club, it's very hard to get there. And so it's kind of like almost like a present value calculation, right? Like you might think that, one guy, one girl right now, but it's not just this one choice, right? It's what you want your club to be, down the line. And another point I want to raise is that I think if we want to have like a theory of like why there are fewer women in finance, I think the relevant one for our clubs, I mean, sure, it could just be that a lot of guys are just sexist pigs, but like I don't think that's a very useful theory, right? Like how do you actually improve the function of the club if that's your theory? But like I think a very easy theory is that going into the club, like we recruit a lot of freshmen and sophomores, right? And so that we basically get a lot of these kids who, all their like older brothers or like all their bros are going into finance, and that's very easy for them to find that. But then when you recruit the young like kids, and a lot of the women there like haven't really had that exposure, then you are structurally biased as a club to recruit fewer women than men. Right? And so when you take specific actions, try to recruit more women, it's not so much affirmative action per se, but it's just like a bias correction, because like you already are biased towards men with the way you recruit. Like you have to find ways around that beyond, if you, like depending on what your structure is. So.
And probably that's a big part of the reason why a lot of diversity initiatives in STEM start in middle school. But Jonathan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think most of the major points on this topic have been brought up, but I guess just in our context. So you mentioned 15%, and I think that's exactly what we have. We have 4 out of around 28 or 30 members. And for us, I mean, last year we had, so the way we're structured, we have a 3-person executive, and last year we had 1 woman who was in one of those positions. And I think that was a pretty significant turning point for us and really sort of helped from an optics standpoint. In terms of actually functioning, I think at least the short-term sort of solution is, as Elaine was mentioning, like reaching out personally. So I think that we're sort of at the numbers level where you can still do that. I don't know if that would be sort of as possible with a larger group, but I think we can still do that, and we do that. But I mean, I don't have sort of a major solution. I think it's just sort of something that we're going to have to see over time, and hopefully we see a shift.
I think actually HVAC is remarkable because this has been a major effort for you for a couple of years. And I actually heard a couple of your execs speaking at last year's summit about their strategy. And it's actually very, very simple. It just comes down to having senior leadership in the group actively reaching out to women. It's simple. It just takes work. And I think a lot of us try and sort of reach and find these magic solutions, magic bullets. They don't really exist.